part of our economy is absolutely vital if we're going to have a robust economy. That doesn't mean there isn't waste and stupidity, and corporate America has plenty of waste and stupidity too.
Well, let's talk about that. I wanted, though, to start with the tax trouble, since you're a tax writing expert, on both Geithner and now the latest news on Daschle. Let's go with Daschle, who has not yet been approved as Secretary of Health and Human Services. Explain what his problem is.
Well, beyond his problem of having been paid enormous sums of money by the insurance companies, which are a central feature in our health care problems, Mr. Daschle was provided with a car and driver by a hedge fund as part of his work for them. When you receive a perk like that, you have to pay taxes. He owes, I think it's $143,000 in taxes on this. He wasn't apparently candid with the Obama people up front about this. And my guess is he's the norm. If the IRS had the money to check up on everyone who works for these big banks and hedge funds, I think they would find vast amounts of perks that are not being taxed. This is part of my arguing that there are two systems of taxation in the United States, separate and unequal. One for working people and one for the rich and powerful, particularly those who own businesses or control them. Daschle's problems are very troubling, but my guess is that if we had a thorough investigation by the IRS, we would find out he's the norm among those people.
You know, one of the jokes right now, I heard the refrain over and over on television all weekend, was, of course, the Democrats are for increasing taxes. They never pay them.
Well, I don't know how many Republicans aren't paying them, because none of them are up for appointment to positions right now, or a couple of them, not very many. And there may be, I have no reason to think that this is a partisan thing. It's a money thing.
And on that issue of receiving money from the health insurance industry, can you elaborate on that further?
Well, Daschle, who is unquestionably among legislators a leading figure in understanding and knowing about health care, went out and made a lot of money from speeches. I mean, I give speeches for money. I don't think there's anything wrong with that per se. But he received so much money, and it came so heavily from the insurance companies. I mean, why do we need to have health insurance? Do we have kindergarten insurance? Do we have police insurance? Do we have road insurance? This is a bizarre system that we have that is unlike that anywhere else in the world, gives us the highest costs in the world, and does not make our health status better.
Explain that a little further, because people are so used to health insurance. It's equated with free market capitalism, yet not the same in other countries. Explain how it operates and how it could be different. You actually have big companies like General Motors now who are really changing the tune in this country around health care.
Yes. Well, Amy, if you have a business, you have to devote a lot of resources not to running that business, but to negotiating for and dealing with health insurance companies for your workers. Our competitors, the Canadians, the Europeans, the Japanese, the Australians, etc., in all other modern countries, the costs of health care are on the books of society. And you don't insure for that because this isn't a risk you're insuring for. It's a cost. You know what it will be every year from the size and age of the population. And so a friend of mine, a former Fox News anchor, found a lump in her breast. She's moving to France. She's not fully into the French system yet. She went to her neighborhood clinic, because under their system you do have to go to the neighborhood clinic. They saw her in a matter of minutes. They quickly determined that all she had was a cyst. They treated her, and she was out the door after paying a €100 fee. She would have paid no fee whatsoever if she had been fully in their system. And they don't have doctors devoting hours and hours to cost accounting. We don't make kindergarten teachers do cost accounting, or police officers or prosecutors. Why do we have doctors doing cost accounting? Because a narrow band of people have become fabulously, unbelievably fabulously wealthy off of this enormously inefficient system we have in America, which doesn't fit with the principles of capitalism. You know, Adam Smith, who figured out market economics and whose book is still in print 233 years later, said that any policy that benefits the majority of the people must be a good policy. Well, this is not a policy that benefits the majority of the people. And health insurance companies have an incentive to not pay. I have a son who had a heart attack. He was taken to one hospital, nearly dead, put in an ambulance, taken to the next hospital, and his health insurance company refuses to pay for the ambulance because they say, well, why didn't you drive yourself?
David Cay Johnston, I wanted to go back to the issue of war and what war is costing, and when we're talking about a stimulus plan.
Well, let me give you just one thing to think about your income taxes. The interest on the debt that Ronald Reagan promised if he was elected he would end, is so great now that it equals all of the money that will be withheld from your paycheck in January, February, March, April, and part of May. All of the rest of the income taxes you will pay for the year go to war. They go to the Pentagon budget. Remember, the war in Iraq and the war in Afghanistan are not on the regular budget. They go to the Energy Department, which is the bomb-making division of the military, and they go to Veterans Affairs, paying for past wars. And as Joe Stiglitz pointed out, in terms of personnel costs, the peak year for World War II was 1993. One of the major reasons that we are in so much trouble in this country is that what Reaganism has brought us is spending without taxing, spending that money in ways that are totally unproductive and counterproductive and impose huge costs on the future. And this huge national debt, which is going to get worse with the stimulus, no question, and put us in danger down the road of a big inflation. But what the national debt does, what borrow and spend does, is it takes taxes from people who work, because that's about 85% of all income tax money from people who work, and it transfers it to capital, people who own the national debt. And who owns the national debt? Banks, insurance companies. Oh, those are businesses we're having to bail out. The thugs in China who shoot independent union organizers, and some older, wealthy Americans. It's a redistribution scheme to take money from working people and redistribute it to capital through the tax system. I'm curious, by the way, why the Republicans don't see this, since they oppose redistribution down. You would think they should be out there actively opposing redistribution up, and a few of them have been.
Looking at the stimulus plan, about $275 billion in tax cuts. That's the House plan, $545 billion in domestic spending. Explain the tax cuts and the spending and how you think it should be broken down. Well,
it's ridiculous to think that business tax cuts will result in hiring people. I happen to also be the chairman of the board of a little company that I formed with one of my sons. We hire people. We hire people because we have more business. We don't hire people to get a tax cut. That's just the most bizarre thing I've ever heard. Business decisions are made on the basis of demand. We need to be spending this money to increase demand. That's not to say that our income tax system isn't a complete mess. I've written 2 books about that, but this is just not the way to stimulate the economy. My biggest concern is that the stimulus package will not be big enough in the areas that will get people not losing their homes and not accelerating that problem of losing their homes. And if it doesn't work, imagine what you're going to be hearing a year from now if the Obama administration has to go back and ask for more money. Well, this failed. Why would we give you any more money? Better to ask for more than you think you need now and pledge not to spend it if the economy recovers. Much smarter to do that. Now, there is one other wrinkle in that, and that is the Republicans in the House all voted against this bill. It was a free vote for them. They knew the bill would come back to them, so they can be against it before they were for it when the final bill comes back. But if the Republicans seriously continue to fight the idea of a stimulus and the economy declines, I do wonder if it might not be part of Obama's strategy to then just have cut the rug out from under them as the economy gets worse, because people are not going to be driven towards Reaganism by an economy that's declining. And it is declining even worse than the statistic you said. It declined in the last period at a rate of 3.8%, but when you add all the inventory, that is all the goods that were manufactured but not sold, it really declined at a rate of 5.6%, and it will get worse, much worse, before it gets better.
David Cay Johnston, do you have any assessment of Judd Gregg, the Republican of New Hampshire that looks like he could be named as the Commerce Secretary, the Republican, the third Republican in the Obama administration, what his record is?
I don't at all, Amy, but I do want to go back to Geithner, because you mentioned him earlier in the show. My column in Tax Notes today is about Mr. Geithner, and it is about how it's hard to believe his claim that he didn't know he was cheating on his taxes. I find his testimony implausible, but I do suggest that there is a way to redeem and show that he cares. One of them is to ask all of the tax software companies to report on whether they can find any of the kind of errors that he says exist and correct them, because part of his duty as Treasury Secretary is to make sure the tax system works efficiently. I suggest that he should also ask the IRS to conduct a thorough investigation in